Morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Hope all of you are awake and not drunk. Still. Okay. So again, thank you for being here, and I hope you'll be able to walk away from this talk having learned something interesting. And if you do, please do let me know. So my talk today is on hacking BLE bicycle locks for fun and little profit. What this talk is about. With the introduction of shared bicycles and rise in popularity in Singapore and other places in the world, I've seen bicycles all over the place used regularly by people who pay a token sum to use them. So this got me wondering how the lock system worked and how secure it would be. Would it be possible to get free rides? Doesn't really cost much to rent a bike, but wouldn't it be fun to hack a lock? So I'm Vincent. I'm from Singapore and currently a security consultant with MWR. And basically hacking mobile and wireless stuff is my thing. What you gain from this talk? I'll give a quick overview of the bike sharing economy and the locks used on shared bikes. I'll do a quick recap on BLE for those of you who aren't familiar. Then I'll move on to walking you through how I analyze the communications between my iOS device and the BLE lock, what worked, what didn't, and how you can actually build a master key from what I've learned and get rides for free. So I'm sure by now we all know that smart locks are rubbish because the state of security now is terrible because, and I could be wrong here, companies only care about features and getting the market as soon as possible. They don't care about designing a secure lock, and they aren't performing any tests to validate the security of the solution. Take, for example, Tab Lock, the latest smart lock to be hacked. It talks about having all these incredible security features, encrypted fingerprint reader, AES 128-bit encryption, anti-theft alarm, but ultimately 2 seconds later got hacked. So what's the situation with these guys? These are the 3 largest bike sharing companies in Singapore as of a few months ago. Ofo and Mobike being companies from China, and Obike, a local Singapore startup which has just filed for bankruptcy not too long ago. So yeah, these guys have operations all over the world and have pretty high valuations across all companies. For all 3 companies, the cost of renting a bike is 50 cents per half hour, roughly about there. Okay, so before all the juicy bits, quick refresher on what Bluetooth Low Energy, aka BLE, is. 2 key things to know to navigate your way around. The first is GAP, or Generic Access Profile. This basically defines what a device is. A device is split into 2 categories, a peripheral device and a central device. A peripheral device is a low-powered device, be it a bicycle lock or a pacemaker, and the central device is a high-powered computing device, either your laptop or your smartphone. Then comes GAT, or Generic Attribute Profile. It defines the way 2 BLE devices transfer data back and forth. And each BLE device will have 1 or more services, and within each service, it will have 1 or more characteristics. So services are groups of characteristics, and a characteristic is a data point of which is identified by a 16-bit or 128-bit UUID. For example, in the case of treadmill, a data point can be the step climber data, heart rate data, inclination, or in the case of a Bluetooth lock, a data point could be the battery life or the lock triggering mechanism. So let me give you an idea for those of you who aren't familiar of how a bicycle lock, what it looks like, how it works, and how it operates. How do you pick a lock when you don't actually own the lock? That's my first hurdle when it came to figuring out how a bike lock would work. Since I pretty much have zero experience in Bluetooth or lock mechanisms, I decided to go buy one instead. Quick search on China's beloved shopping site, Taobao. I came upon this lock for $30 and appears to operate the same way as the locks used on the shared bicycles. Also, apparently, this company does OEM the entire solutions to bike sharing companies. Maybe one of my targets would use it. In essence, this is the entire process of how renting a bike works. You download one of the apps, Mobike, OFO, what have you. You enable Bluetooth on your phone. You fund your account. You scan the QR code on the bike, and the bike will automatically unlock. The bikes have a small solar panel to charge the battery in the lock, and most locks do not come with built-in GPS. GPS data is provided by a phone, and wherever you cycle to and finally lock your bike is where the app will record your GPS data and send it off to the cloud. There are some locks which are more expensive and do have built-in GPS. So first thing I did was to tear it apart upon receiving it. And so the QR code is up there, and batteries, a 4-cell battery inside, which charges via USB for this lock. A small Bluetooth logic controller radio, and this is the motor that releases the lock. It's a spring-loaded lock. The lock is held in place with a pin through the notch up there. And when the unlock command is received, the motor will engage the pin to release the lock. So, time to actually look at how the lock and app were communicating. Because I had no idea where to begin and how Bluetooth worked, I turned to a great presentation by this guy, where it was effectively man-in-the-middle Bluetooth connections, thus allowing modifications of packets. I unfortunately was not able to get the setup working for that, so I couldn't try that. Another fantastic presentation by Anthony Rose and Ben Ramsey from DEF CON 24, where they used an Ubertooth one to sniff BLE packets and use Wireshark to basically figure out what was going on. But for the life of me, I had no idea what was going on. So this is how the capture looks like. You see one write request and one write response, and after this traffic got sent through, the lock unlocked. But what does the bytes mean? And after replaying this packet, nothing happened. So there should be something else going on. So back to square one. I figured I needed two things to be able to help me understand what was going on. First, I needed to figure out how the app was communicating with the lock. What were the endpoints that were being communicated with, and what services or characteristics that the app used. And second, how could I intercept the BLE traffic to understand what was going on? For the first problem, I needed a way to figure out and understand how the app communicated with the lock via Bluetooth. After doing a little more Googling, I found a tool written by EvilSocket, Blair, and you may know EvilSocket as the more famous author of the BattleCap toolkit. So what Blair essentially does is that it enumerates services and characteristics on a BLE device. This will easily allow me to see in a practical manner what services and what characteristics there are on a device that can be read to or written to, read from or written to. In this screenshot at the bottom, you can see the different characteristics that can be read from and written to under the properties column. And for my second problem, since I have the app and the lock, and basically the app unlocks the lock, it all comes down to understanding the process of what BLE messages are being sent to the lock. I turn to Frida and the Frida trace tool, which will allow me to view in real time what the app was processing. For those of you who have not used Frida before, it's a wonderful tool to allow instrumentation of applications across various platforms. In particular, the Frida trace tool for the iOS platform allows users to, in essence, log in relatively real-time Objective-C classes and methods and C functions which are accessed and executed by the application. Since we can use Frida to hook and view methods and messages being sent, we now need to figure out which ones to use. In iOS, I found that the core Bluetooth framework is used to perform Bluetooth communications. And the CB peripheral and peripheral delegate classes are of most interesting. In particular, the read value, write value, and set notify value are of interest. It is quite obvious what these values do. Read value reads some data from the characteristics. Write value writes some data to the characteristic. And another interesting property about BLE is that it is possible to get a peripheral, in this case the lock, to push data to the app. This is done through the notify property of the characteristic, and it can be enabled by the set notify value method. And to capture data that's coming back through that push message, we can then trace the did update methods of the CB peripheral delegate class. So after a lot of reversing of the app, proxying of HTTP traffic, and recording of BLE reads and writes, I've come up with the following process to unlock the bicycle lock that I bought from China. You first scan the QR code from the lock. The app will get a lock key from the server. Server responds with a lock key. App makes a request to the lock for an encrypted token. Lock responds with the encrypted token. App decrypts the token with the key from the server and sends another write request to unlock the lock. So this is a challenge and response process where the lock will provide a token, and if you have the corresponding key, you'll be able to decrypt the token and send the result back to the lock to get it to unlock. By the way, if it wasn't already clear, the security of this lock and the company making this lock is horrible. I can retrieve any lock key from the server by incrementing the lock ID. And the company doesn't only make bicycle locks, it makes home locks and padlocks and all sorts of other kinds of locks. So let's try to get this working in the real world. Now we already know how such a lock could work and the steps needed to understand how it works. What methods to hook, what kind of operations the app and the lock could perform. How does it compare to an actual lock used by the bike sharing companies? For the most part, the hardware is pretty much the same. Someone did a YouTube video teardown of the O-bike lock. And as we can see here, there's only a single cell battery on this. This is the physical lock. And there's a Texas Instruments CC2541 SoC chip, which controls the motor. So now let's figure out the services and characteristics, UUIDs that could be of interest. We know that these are the characteristics of interest, but aren't really sure which is responsible for what. We need to trace the flow of the app to identify which characteristics was used and most communicated with. As it turns out, the FFF6 characteristic is the one of most interest. To guide you through the next couple of slides, what I've done is to lay out the entire process here to show you how the lock unlocks. So, same thing. First, you scan the QR code. The app checks the lock status with the server and also sends it your coordinates. The app responds with the lock status, and if okay, the app will then proceed to request a token from the lock. Within the app and HTTP requests made to the server, this is known as a key source. So then the app uses the key source to request an unlock key from the server. Server replies with an unlock key, and the app uses that unlock key to unlock the bike. So similar to the lock that I bought off Taobao, it appears to have some sort of challenge and response mechanism. Let's go through it in a little more detail. Scanning the QR code provides the app with the ID number of the lock to unlock. As seen in point 1 above, the QR code is basically the URL of the bike company with the bike ID at the end. Assuming you use the O-Bike app to scan the code, the next request is then made to the server with the lock ID and the current coordinates of where the lock is scanned. Server responds to the status check with whether the lock is faulty or not based on reports from other users. If it's not, the app will proceed to the next step. Here, the app requests a key source from the lock, and this can be a little confusing, so let me explain. As I mentioned earlier, it's possible for a peripheral device to send push notifications, also known as notify, in BLE back to the app. So as shown here, the app is setting the notify flag in the FFF6 characteristic, set notify value 1. Next, the app sends a request for the key source to the lock by performing a BLE write. The bottom one here is a dump of the BLE write at the memory location and shows that the write command is in the form of 67, 74, 00, 81, 81, and that it is being sent to the same FFF6 characteristic. So now the app waits, and if the command sent was correct and accepted by the lock will respond with a notification containing the key source. Here we see the notification response from the lock through the did update value for characteristic method. And within the response data, the app picks out the key source as shown highlighted in red. What the rest of the data means, I have no idea and don't really need to know, because every time this transaction happens, the key source is always taken from the same string location, the 9th to the 12th bytes. The key source is then sent to the server through the unlock pass API, and assuming no errors, the server then responds with a pair of keys. So now we've got the keys. How are they used? Next, an unlock message is constructed and sent to the FFF6 characteristic in 2 parts. As you can see, the 2 write value messages, again, below is the dump of what the actual message is. And it basically kind of looks similar to the messages that I tried replaying earlier from the Wireshark capture, which didn't work. So I dug a little deeper to find out how the unlock message is constructed and try to piece together what each of the values meant. After looking at numerous unlock messages, I found the following. In the first message, the first 2 bytes are always static throughout all messages sent from the app to the lock. The next byte is also static, and I presume to be the length of the message. Subsequently, the next byte could be the unlock command, followed by the key index provided by the server. And then next subsequent 6 bytes are static. Again, no idea what they mean. Doesn't matter. And for the final 5 bytes, it's the date and timestamp. Message 2 contains the key from the server. However, this key has been truncated to 12 bytes. Again, why this has been done, I have no idea. Last byte is a checksum for the entire message, and this is done by performing an XOR of each byte across both messages. So I had to jump through a lot of hoops on my journey, and the first was trying to understand what messages was being sent from the app to the server. As you can see here, the messages look to be encrypted. Why the programmers would encrypt messages sent to the server is beyond me. And basically, they're just wasting their time and my time. So with Frida, it's easy to hook the right methods. And I found the messages were encrypted using AES, using a combination of a static string and version number of the application provided in the HTTP header. Okay, so encryption killed. But if you notice that there's a string tagged to the back of the message sent to the server, what the heck is that? Again, the developers implemented another form of integrity check for some unknown reason to make my life harder. With further assistance from Frida, it was found that the string is basically a SHA-1 sum of the following values: the message to be sent to the server, static string, and the application version. Now, you must be wondering how users get charged. After the byte is unlocked, the app sends a status message to the server to inform it has been unlocked. Then it starts a timer on the server. When you finish with the byte, again, the app sends a lock status and the server stops the timer. So you can see where I'm going with this. Lastly, the server will build a user account accordingly. So if I write my own app to perform the unlock and stop sending the server any information after unlocking the byte, I get free rights. My account is not charged. Server doesn't know I've unlocked the byte. So finally, after jumping through the ridiculous hoops and understanding how BLE communication works, how the unlock command is formed, I built my own key. It's less dramatic without sound. Okay, I'm not sure if you heard that, but yeah. Okay, as you've no doubt noticed, opening the lock depends on a connection to the server. How then can you get it to unlock offline? Since Obike has recently gone bankrupt, somebody dismantled the lock from the bike, retrieved the chip and sent it over to me. So my solution was to try and get a dump of the firmware to figure that out. Unfortunately, the readout fuse was set on the TI chip and wasn't really possible for me to dump the firmware. If anyone knows other methods of extracting firmware from this TI chip, I'd like to hear from you. However, I've recently been in touch with a security researcher from Switzerland after I submitted my CFP. And earlier this month, because of the bankruptcy, he managed to get a whole bunch of locks and had some fun with them. Last week, he figured that there is a possibility of unlocking them offline. I won't reveal more as it is his research and for him to share with the world, but it is an interesting implementation flaw. Okay, relatively easy to unlock the bike from one bike sharing company. Should be relatively easy to do it for another. No? Same thing, start off by finding the services and characteristics UUID that could be of interest. Looks to be a lot simpler here. 2 characteristics, and it's obvious which we need to write to unlock the bike. For Mobike, the process in unlocking the lock is much simpler. Same as before, you scan the QR code and get a bike ID. The app checks the lock status with the server and sends your coordinates. Server responds with the lock status. However, this time, if the lock is in good condition, the server will automatically send along the unlock key. The app then uses that unlock key to unlock the lock. So no challenge response this time, just a direct unlock. As before, let's go through that in a little bit more detail. Similar to O-Bike, after the bike is unlocked, a lock status is sent to the server, timer starts, users finish, app sends the lock status back to the server, timer ends, user account is built, and since we've cut off messages after unlocking the bike, timer on the server never really starts. Again, I've encountered various crazy integrity checks implemented by the developers. In the HTTP messages for the Mobike app, there's a sign parameter and there's an EP data parameter. How are these formed? What are these? In this case, they have used RSA encryption to encrypt the user ID string with the date time stamp, and the output of that is then used in a message sent to the server. The sign parameter is basically a MD5 hash of data, the entire data packet that's being sent to the server. So again, the process starts out the same. The user scans a QR code, and within the QR code is a URL with the bike ID at the end. Assuming you've used the Mobike app to scan the QR code, a request is made to the server with the log ID and coordinates of where it was scanned. As mentioned before, the difference is here. The application server will respond with a faulty message if the lock has been reported faulty by a number of users, or it will respond immediately with the unlock key if the lock is in good condition. This differs from Mobike in that it doesn't require a challenge from the lock. So what happens with the key from the server? Firstly, according to the trace, the app tells the lock to send it a notification by setting the set notify value to 1 on both characteristics, the FE0 and FE1 characteristics. The app then breaks up the key into 3 9-byte pieces, appends a 2-byte header to each, and then writes it to the lock via Bluetooth, and it unlocks. To make it a little clearer, the key response from the server is broken into 3 9-byte pieces, and an incremental header is appended and written to the lock, and it unlocks. Straightforward and simple. In testing, it's not really that simple because it seemed the lock had some way of keeping track of time, because every key received from the server for the same lock is always different. Additionally, if there is a delay in sending the key to the lock, it will not work. So, again, after all that trouble, modified my app and so this time around, I only programmed this specific bike ID into my app to save me the trouble. In summary, there were two types of lock schemes across the 3 locks that I faced. The first was a challenge response scheme where the challenge was requested from the lock. This data is then sent to the server to process, or data was processed on the client side. Output from this processing was then used to unlock the lock. The other type was a direct unlock of the lock based on a key provided by the server. So when I started, I had no idea how BLE worked and how one would begin looking at BLE devices. There was no process or one that I was aware of when I started on how to look at BLE stuff. I hope, given the following repeatable process, anyone who has wanted to start breaking BLE devices would have an easier time. As with any project, first we need to enumerate our attack surface, and I found this to be easily done with BLE. As shown previously, we can use BLE to enumerate the characteristics and services of any BLE device and understand what we can communicate with. Then we find out if the app does send if the device does send notifications to the app. If so, we enable notifications by setting the set notify value. Lastly, with Frida, we hook the appropriate read and write methods to figure out what messages are being read from and written to the BLE device. And we also hook the did update methods to find out what notifications, if any, are being sent from the peripheral to the central device. I didn't make use of any special hardware, no Ubertooth 1, no custom hardware, or developed any man-in-the-middling app. I used a $5 Bluetooth dongle to enumerate the BLE device, and my iPhone for the mobile app, with Frida for understanding the communications between the app and the lock. Hopefully anyone can do this as well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Vincent. And happily we have time for Q&A. Any questions from the floor? Or as usual, we'll do it off stage.
Thank you.
Well, this gives us some time then. Thanks again, Vincent. This gives us some time to set up for the next speaker before we start, which will be, the next speaker's talk will start at 11:30. So we've got a couple of minutes. You've got 25 minutes. So we can have more coffee. Oh, you have a question? All right. Well, just give me a second, Vincent. Hang on. One question from the floor.
Thanks. Hi. I'm curious, since you've been through the process of looking into the security of bike locks, if you were to set up a bicycle company, how would you implement the security and why?
All new talk there.
Okay, that's a very good question, because before looking at Mobike and Obike, I looked at OFO. And what they've done is, before sending you the unlock key, they have already started to deduct money from your account. So, I guess the simple way is to first take money from the user and then give them the key to unlock. One way that could be done. Unfortunately, I've not seen too many locks out there which have been developed securely. So I can't really comment on what a secure development process would look like.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Yes?
Do none of the bike locks that you've looked into communicate directly with the servers? Like through GSM?
No, I've not, but I've heard from a friend of mine that there's apparently locks that do. They have GSM cards in them, which can provide GPS and communicate directly. There are also smart bike sharing companies, those motor scooters in San Francisco, being developed by a company that basically circumvents that entire user unlock process.
Okay.
So there are new locks being developed that way. There should be other interesting things that we can find from there. But so far in Singapore, I've not seen that used.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right. No. Well, another round of applause for Vincent.
Thank you.